So that game was really boring. I thought there was not much to that. And then on top of it, Michigan State lost to Nebraska, and so our big undefeated showdown in Columbus on November 21st is no more. So Ohio State wins 28-14 over Minnesota, and Michigan State loses to Nebraska 39-38, I think it was. It was close. It was late. Nebraska with a touchdown in the final 30 seconds. Bill, what does this mean? Other than, we can be disappointed that we're not going to have undefeated Ohio State versus undefeated Michigan State. It's still going to be a good game, but what does it mean for the Buckeyes that the Spartans maybe aren't going to be quite what we thought they were?
I think I'm probably overreacting to it a little too much at this point, but I think it's a pretty big deal that that's not going to be undefeated versus undefeated, because I don't think the committee was very high on Michigan State to begin with, even though they were unbeaten. And now that Michigan State has a loss to Nebraska, which has been terrible this year, I think even if Ohio State, short of coming out and beating Michigan State 60-0, I think there's much less to gain now for Ohio State in that game. In the beginning of the year, that was going to be the only game we thought they could hang their hat on. And now it's, I don't know. I guess it still could be. But I think, and like I said, maybe overreacting a bit now, I think that's a pretty big deal for Ohio State that's not going to be an undefeated team they're playing in 2 weeks.
Okay, that's the ranking committee perspective. You've written a lot about Michigan State. You've written about them turning 2 stars into great players. We know that Mark D'Antonio and that program have an eternal chip on their shoulder. What do you think is the impact from that standpoint of Michigan State now has a loss? They're probably a little ticked off about it. There's some controversy at the end, whether that even should have been a touchdown for Nebraska. How do you think it maybe will affect Michigan State coming in here now, not coming in on equal footing, but coming in still trying to win the East, still trying to get to the Big Ten championship, but maybe in a little bit more of a spoiler role?
I can already hear Mark D'Antonio at a podium somewhere saying, we are as good of a one-loss team as any other one-loss team in the country, because it's kind of like that routine every year. And I feel like more than anything, he wants to be able to make that argument. And the only way that he can make that argument is if they beat Ohio State. And then if they do, they might actually have a real argument at that. So, Michigan State has done a good job of, like you said, getting players, especially from Ohio, and building a system. And they have a solid foundation of a team. It's just unbelievable that, what about our angle? We're going to go an entire season and not know if they're good until the final game of the year on the road. Ohio State doesn't have a big game like an Alabama, LSU, or anything all year. And I think that more so than anything, it's just another week and Ohio State's going to be behind the bushes of primetime and taking a back seat nationally. And, I think that's kind of a tough thing for Ohio State to be in right now.
Okay, so I think it mostly stinks for us because it would have been cool. That was going to be the Big Ten equivalent of Alabama, LSU. Okay.
It's a huge recruiting weekend, too, just so you know.
Right.
That's their biggest recruiting weekend of the year. It's probably going to be a day game now. Probably might have. I don't know. You know more about that than I do.
I don't know if it was going to be night anyway, but now it's probably going to be 3:30.
But the buzz around it nationally,
yes.
It's not going to be ESPN all week. Probably
yes.
the way that Alabama LSU was.
Yes.
There's a certain beauty to, the idea of this place is going to be bumping 10-0 game of the century, number 2 versus Michigan State's a really good team and we have to be ready for them type of an attitude.
I think the buzz is the big effect. I think the Big Ten getting attention is the big effect. I don't think it changes who Michigan State is. They're still the same team just because they had a screwy loss at the end. They've played some close games against not great teams the whole year, but they have a quarterback in Connor Cook who can make plays. They have some receivers. They have a decent run game. They have a really good front four. None of that has changed, okay? It doesn't change who Michigan State is as a team. I actually think it might put a burr in their saddle. It might be worse for Ohio State because now this is going to be grumpy, ticked off, we got, messed up by the officials kind of thing. And the thing is, Michigan State I don't think is completely out of the playoff mix. I don't know anything is what's going to happen with the one-loss teams, but if they beat Ohio State, then beat Penn State, then go and beat maybe undefeated Iowa in the Big Ten championship, that's going to be a good one-loss resume, especially since the loss is on the road and maybe the officials had something to do with it. It was by a point. That will help them. So most of that stuff is still in play for Michigan State. And I don't know if it matters for Ohio State because, bottom line, Ohio State wins out. 13-0 Ohio State is in. They're in. There's zero doubt. 13-0, Ohio State is in. One loss, Ohio State is up for grabs. Yeah. Whether that loss is to Illinois or Michigan State or Michigan. And the thing that will matter with Michigan State, if Michigan State beats Ohio State head-to-head, whether they were undefeated or whether they have this loss, Michigan State would be ahead of Ohio State in the rankings to get to the Big Ten title game. So that would be a bummer for Ohio State in the playoff case if that one loss is to Michigan State, okay? Yeah. So, doesn't matter. It matters, like, for us, for writing undefeated stories. Otherwise,
and finding out about
basically, no, but I don't think... why? It's not. Michigan State's not any different of a team. If the officials would have called that the Nebraska receiver ran out of bounds and they would have called it correctly and Michigan State would have won, they're still the exact same team, aren't they?
I mean, I felt like last year's turning point of the season when Ohio State switched maybe they don't need one this year because of the team that they have, but like there was a turning point last year when Ohio State went from, oh, it's cute that they're winning these games to a legitimate major player in the conference. That was at Michigan State last year. And it's just like now Ohio State has everything to lose in that game because losing it could, kind of change the direction of their season, but winning it isn't going to be as big of a marquee turning point as maybe it should have been.
But they don't need a marquee turning point because last year they needed it because they had people doubting them. Now they're the defending national champions. They are on this huge winning streak, 22 straight. Yeah. Winning, they're in. Yeah. Zero effect. Ari Wasserman, Bill Landis. We're in the garage. That's Ohio Stadium. I'm Doug LeMaurice. Ari forgot the stuff in the trunk. That's why we had to do it here. It's okay, though. It happens to everybody.
I love that.
Thanks for watching at cleveland.com.